What I'm trying to figure out is how you get from a society where inequality is the dominant ethos to one in which the Brazilian Constitution says that one of the aims of the national state is to combat inequality. My name is Brodwyn Fischer. I'm a professor of history at the University of Chicago. I always think of maybe three different influences on where I ended up. The first is that I love cities, and Central America was during that time sort of what the Middle East is now. It was the place where the United States was most actively involved in foreign intervention. And so as I had my kind of political awakening that lots of people have when they're a teenager, that was the area of the world that I was drawn to. But the other element of it is that unlike a lot of people in institutions like the University of Chicago or Northwestern or Harvard, where I've also spent time, I grew up in a very poor family, and so I had a sense as I started to realize that I wanted to be a historian, that there were things about that experience that I wasn't finding described in the books that I was reading about people that were like I was, or who occupied kind of the same socioeconomic level in very different places and very different times. And so because of that, I just began to study poor people in cities in Latin America, and all those things came together. And so I think a lot of what I'm trying to do is kind of go from the inside out and create new narratives about what it means to be poor and an actor who makes a difference in historical processes in Brazil and in Latin America, but also a lot more generally in the world. In my teaching, one of the things that really makes me feel like I'm doing something that's worthwhile is that I feel like I can bring to an American audience some kind of awareness of what our history in that region has been, the very different kinds of influences that Americans have had on very important aspects of Latin American people's lives, and some sense of knowledge in a region that's really been dominated by foreigners' ignorance about it. And so it feels a little bit like something that's worthwhile to do because of that. I think there's really a chance to begin a dialogue that doesn't just apply US or European ideas to Latin America, but actually begins to understand what it is that people in those regions are understanding about cities that we might not see. And I think once we start seeing the world through those eyes, we realize, wait a minute, but in the United States we have exactly the same thing going on. And so it's not that Brazil's some kind of exception or that the developing world is that way and we're a different way. It's that we tend to have this vision of ourselves and our history and our institutions that puts the formal front and center and thinks of everything else as exceptional. And when we reverse that, I think we can learn a lot about our own systems as well.